Hey, welcome to World Scope Updates. The news flashed across screens. Canada had closed its land routes to Alaska, America's northernmost state, suddenly an island. Phones rang incessantly in Washington, Ottawa, and Juneau. How could this happen? The longest undefended border in the world. Now, a choke point, a symbol of sudden, shocking division. The initial reports were sparse but clear. Access denied. It was late afternoon, May 31st, 2025. People were preparing for their weekends. Then, the alert. A Canadian government decree. Effective immediately. All US-bound commercial and civilian traffic to and from Alaska through Canadian territory was suspended. Indefinitely. The reasons cited were vague. National security concerns, reciprocal measures. But everyone knew. This was retaliation. A direct, stunning response to escalating trade tensions. The unthinkable had become reality. A continental crisis was born in a single news bulletin. The silence in newsrooms was deafening for a moment. Then, chaos. Reporters scrambled, experts were called. Alaska, a state dependent on these land routes for so much, was now cut off. Down in Florida, at Mar-a-Lago, the news hit like a thunderbolt. Donald Trump reportedly exploded. He had just announced steep tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and lumber. He thought Canada would fold. He was wrong. He took to Truth Social. Treasonous, he declared. Canada will pay. He had initiated the latest trade spat. Now he was reeling from the counterblow. His advisors were scrambling to manage the fallout. Ottawa's decision was not made lightly. It was a gamble. A high-stakes poker move in a game with global implications. For weeks, Canadian officials had warned Washington, privately, publicly. The new American tariffs were unacceptable. They were damaging. They violated the spirit, if not the letter, of existing trade agreements. But their pleas had fallen on deaf ears. Trump, it seemed, was determined to pick a fight. So, Canada chose its weapon carefully, the Alaska Highway. The closure was surgical, precise. It targeted a key vulnerability, a pressure point. The Alaska Highway and other routes like the Cassiar are vital arteries for goods, for people, for the Alaskan economy. By shutting them down, Canada was sending a clear message. We will not be bullied. We have leverage too. The move was bold, unprecedented. It sent shockwaves through the diplomatic world. Canada, often seen as America's polite, deferential neighbor, had bared its teeth. Prime Minister Trudeau addressed his nation later that evening. His tone was somber, regretful, but firm. He spoke of sovereignty, of fairness, of the need to stand up for Canadian workers and industries. He expressed hope for a swift resolution. The Alaska Highway is not just asphalt and gravel. It is a legend, a lifeline, carved out of wilderness during World War II, a monumental feat of engineering, built in a breathtaking 8 months. Its purpose, then, to connect Alaska to the contiguous United States. Today, its significance remains immense. For Alaskans, it's the primary land route to the lower 48. For tourists, it's an epic adventure, a journey through some of North America's most stunning landscapes. The immediate economic impact was brutal. Global markets, already skittish from the tariff wars, reacted sharply. Oil prices flickered. Shipping stocks with Alaskan interests took a nosedive. The tourism industry in Alaska, heavily reliant on summer road trippers, faced catastrophe. Bookings were canceled. Hotels emptied. Businesses that catered to travelers along the highway, on both sides of the border, saw their revenue evaporate overnight. The cost was mounting, hour by hour. Politically, the fallout was equally intense. Washington was in an uproar. Republicans, largely supportive of Trump's tough stance on trade, were now faced with an angry Alaskan constituency. Democrats condemned the president's aggressive tactics. They argued this crisis was a direct result of his reckless foreign policy. International allies watched with concern. The dispute between two of the world's closest partners was a worrying sign of growing instability in a fragile global order. In Alaska itself, there was a mixture of anger and anxiety. Anger at Canada, for what many saw as a hostile act, but also anger at their own federal government, for allowing relations to deteriorate to this point. Alaskans are a resilient people. used to isolation. But this was different. The lawyers were sharpening their pencils. International trade lawyers, treaty experts, diplomatic legal advisors. Was Canada's action legal? The question hung heavy in the air. The United States and Canada are signatories to numerous agreements governing trade, transit, and border management. The North American Free Trade Agreement, replaced by the USMCA, had provisions. But did they cover a situation this extreme, this unprecedented? It was a legal gray area, a quagmire. Some argued Canada was within its rights, citing national sovereignty and the ability of a nation to control its borders, especially in response to perceived economic aggression. Others vehemently disagreed. They claimed the closure violated long-standing transit agreements, specifically those ensuring access to Alaska. The debate would rage in op-eds, in academic journals, and in the halls of international courts. Beyond the high-level politics and economic charts, there were people. Ordinary lives thrown into turmoil. Truck drivers stranded, with perishable goods rotting in their trailers. Families separated. Vacation plans shattered. Alaskans visiting family in the lower 48 suddenly unable to drive home. Canadians with business or family in Alaska facing the same predicament. The human cost was immediate and deeply personal. The phones at airline companies were jammed. Ferry services were overwhelmed. Small towns along the Alaska Highway, both in Canada and the United States, faced an existential threat. These communities, like Watson Lake in the Yukon or Tok in Alaska, are waypoints. Their economies are built around the flow of travelers, gas stations, motels, restaurants, souvenir shops. Suddenly, the lifeblood was cut off. Business owners stared at empty parking lots, empty tables, wondering how they would survive. Employees faced layoffs. The anxiety was palpable. Fear for the future spread like wildfire. Consider the medical implications. Alaskans sometimes travel to Canadian cities like Edmonton or Vancouver for specialized medical care. The world watched with a mixture of disbelief and apprehension. The United States and Canada, two of the closest allies on the planet, locked in a bitter, escalating dispute. If this could happen here, what did it mean for global stability, for international cooperation? Leaders in Europe, in Asia, urged calm. They called for dialogue, for a swift, peaceful resolution. The global economy, already fragile, could ill afford a trade war, especially not between these two North American giants. International organizations began to stir. The United Nations, the G7, the Organization of American States. Offers of mediation were quietly floated. Behind the scenes, diplomats worked frantically, trying to find an off-ramp, a way for both sides to de-escalate without losing face. The stakes were incredibly high. This was not just about tariffs on lumber or access to Alaska. It was about the principles of free trade, of peaceful dispute resolution, of maintaining stable international relations. The crisis highlighted the interconnectedness of the modern world. A dispute between two nations could have far-reaching consequences. Despite the angry rhetoric and the very real pain, glimmers of hope began to emerge. Cautious, fragile. But there, back channels were reportedly opening. Senior officials, below the level of Trump and Trudeau, were said to be talking, exploring potential compromises. Could the tariffs be suspended, phased out? Could Canada, in return, reopen the highway? Perhaps with some new understandings, some assurances. The path was fraught with difficulty. Trust had been severely damaged. The sheer economic cost, mounting daily, was a powerful incentive for both sides. Businesses in the United States, reliant on Canadian supply chains or exports, were screaming. Canadian industries, facing United States tariffs and the potential for more, were equally desperate. The political pressure on both leaders was immense. From their own parties, from affected communities, from the international community. Neither Trump nor Trudeau wanted to be blamed for a prolonged, devastating economic conflict. Pride was a factor, but so was pragmatism. A potential first step might be a cooling-off period, a temporary suspension of both the tariffs and the border closure to allow for intensive negotiations.